In actual fact, the problems that people have, local authorities can do virtually nothing about.
Anyway, look, to sweeten this US-style pill, the first mayor that Bristol was proffered was the former merchant venturer, George Ferguson, who's also the former president of the Royal Institute for British Architects. And I spoke to George earlier today about what he makes of this decision next week to have a vote on whether to have a referendum to get rid of the whole mayor position, which he fulfilled for its first 4 years.
George Ferguson, previous Mayor of Bristol, 2012 to 2016. And in spite of having been the Mayor and stood for Mayor, I think it's absolutely crazy that we have two mayors that now bicker at each other and are weakening the position of Bristol and the west of England as a result. And it would be so much better if we had one strong mayor for the metro region, as Manchester and Birmingham do, for instance, or the West Midlands do, where government would take us so much more seriously than they currently do, because at the moment they don't know who to relate to, and we are losing out as a result in the Bristol and Bath City region. So I strongly believe that we should remove the mayoral position in Bristol, which I wouldn't have stood for if the Metro Mayor position had existed, and that we move to a much more democratic cabinet system that hopefully would contain more than one party, which both of the mayors, myself and Marvin, had agreed to, because I think it's very damaging that we now have single-party domination in terms of policy and decision-making in Bristol.
What about this whole idea of the councillors? Because they don't really seem to have much role anymore.
Well, it has neutered the councillors' position, and I think councillors are really important. I mean, I think I was to blame to a certain extent for doing that when I was mayor, and I learned as I went along the importance of the ward councillors in terms of representation. I think while I always knew it, I think that sometimes I was attacked by councillors for being a bit too heavy-handed, and I didn't think that I was, but they thought I was, and therefore I probably was. And I think it is much fairer to have a proportionally represented council that is in proportion to the people's votes across the city, and that the cabinet should be similarly proportional as well, which my cabinet was, and it was a great way of breaking down the barriers between the artificial barriers of party politics that are so less relevant to local politics than they are to national politics.
Okay, but what about this argument that, this is a way of cutting through the bureaucracy? Stuff gets done when you've got a mayor.
Well, does it? Some of the wrong stuff gets done. And I think there is an unholy alliance between the business community and the mayor's office at the moment. And I was challenged by the business community on some of the environmental policies and traffic and car restriction policies that I was bringing in, because they didn't like it. But I think now there is an unholy alliance, and when the two are encouraging each other, you get some very dangerous policies. And I see that Business West, for instance, is backing the continuation of a mayor, because I think they find it easier to manipulate the council under a mayor than they do when it is a much broader democracy. So, yes, things get done, but do all the right things get done?
And which way do you think it's going to go on Tuesday?
Well, I'm pretty hopeful that it will go what I'd say is the right way, in that we, in favour of having a referendum across the city to rid us of the secondary role of Bristol Mayor, as opposed to the primary role of Metro Mayor. And so I think that the Lib Dems who have brought it in will be backed by the Tories, and there's a good chance they'll be backed by the Greens, in which case, if that does go down party lines, then there will be a pretty safe majority. It all depends on which way the Greens go in the end. And I know there are some Labour councillors who are very uncomfortable with the situation as it currently stands. But are they brave enough to stick their necks out?
Well, especially when you see that some of those that have previously stuck their necks out were deselected and different councillors brought in. Anyway, look, finally, George, what about the zoo? Because you have a campaign going, I know, to try and stop it being turned into luxury flats.
Yes, I mean, I think that there is a PR campaign going on by the zoo as if somehow this is going to still be a wonderful garden for the public. I mean, what member of the public would go out of their way to walk around a private gated housing estate that is open some of the time, other than to see how the other half lives? It is a complete nonsense, and there is a serious overdevelopment of the site, which would bring between 100 and 150 cars onto the gardens, onto the site, and would absolutely wreck the nature of this valuable historic garden. After all, it was the 4th zoo in the world, or the 5th zoo in the world. It was the first provincial zoo in the world. 1835. Brunel was one of the founders. Another one of the founders was the guy who found the dinosaur, discovered the 4th dinosaur in the world, just next to where the zoo is. And so it's got a wonderful history, and it's got an amazing social relevance in that it brings people of all types from all places into Clifton. Without it, Clifton is simply a posh housing estate with expensive schools and specialty shopping.